Hi, how are you doing? Today I'm here with my March wrap up. I feel like March was a bit of a hectic month, but I know I have been saying quite a lot, but I was really bad at sticking to my own plans in March. So it's all just my fault. So I feel like that's gonna be reflected in this wrap up as well. But I don't know, I'm so very excited to talk to you about the books that I did read this month. So let's just delve into my stats. Let's start off with the fact that I read 11 books this month, which amounted to 3,772 pages read, which is an average of 342.90 pages per book and an average of 122.67 pages per day. And I finished one series this month, so there is that. For format, I read 2 books I physically own. For ebooks, 4 galleys from that galley, I read a library book. Now I do have to say that 2 of the ebooks that I read this month, I did buy physical copies of afterwards. So you will see me hold up a physical copy in this video, but for the stats, it counts as an ebook, not an own book, because, well, I read them, I didn't own them yet, if that makes sense. Then for star rating, we are all over the board yet again. We have 1 star, 2 stars, 2 3 stars, 4 stars, and 2 5 stars, which is an average rating of 3.36. So that could go a little bit higher if I wanted to. Then for age ratings, I read 5 young adult books and 6 adult books. For genre, we have 5 contemporaries, 1 non-fiction, 2 fantasies, and 3 dystopian novels. So those are a breakdown of the stats. Let's actually get into the books I read this month, starting off with The Wedding People by Alison Espach, which I gave 4 to 5 stars to the I got from the Neck Alley. This is one that I have seen a lot about in the past year, but I just kind of been putting off reading because it is a bit more literary leaning, and if you know me, you know that's not typically my thing, so I was a bit scared of it, but I finally pushed myself to read it and I'm very glad to say that I did enjoy it. It's very different from what I expected. The start wasn't like my favorite because that is very much in team with our characters, kind of like main characters kind of depression, but once we kind of get through that first bit, like the first quarter or so, I feel like this book gets a lot more fun, which doesn't seem to be the right word for it considering kind of more the harder topics that it deals with. It deals with well in my opinion, but it does generally become a bit fun to read. It is very entertaining. It was very easy to fly through. I laughed much more than I was expecting. The characters are a bit of a mess. A lot of a mess, but they are really fun to follow, and I just liked reading this book a lot. I don't know what else to say about it, I'm sorry. Then next I read I'll Be Gone in the Dark, One Woman's Obsessive Search for the Golden State Killer by Michelle McNamara, which I gave 2 to 5 stars to. This was a bit of a disappointment to me, as you can tell by the rating, because this is again a book that I've heard so many great things about, and honestly I see the potential, and this is gonna sound very harsh, but I feel like if Michelle McNamara got the chance to finish this book herself, because she passed before the book was finished, I feel like if she could have finished this book herself, I feel like it would have been like really great, because the writing chops are there. Like, she's a phenomenal writer. I totally get the hype behind this book because of that, but I just feel like it was very messily put together, and like there was a lot of like train of thoughts that led nowhere. Also a lot of repetitiveness, and just the order things were told in just didn't always make the most sense, like how we jump from topic to topic each chapter. So that is kind of like where all of my issues with this book came from, that it just like wasn't a great reading experience because of that. But I do generally think that if Michelle McNamara got the chance to finish it, one, she could have finished those thoughts that were still open-ended, but probably maybe like the order she would have put these things in or stuff would have maybe made more sense. I don't know. Then next I read Foul Lady Fortune by Chloe Gong, which I gave 4 to 5 stars to. This is the start of a spin-off series of the These Violent Delights duology. Series is also a duology, and I really enjoyed the duology, so I'm very excited to delve into this, but it's taking me some time, I know. This takes place in 1930 Shanghai. It's also fantasy. This one is a bit more like spy and assassin focused rather than the first duology that is more like gangs focused, but I would highly recommend reading These Violent Delights and Our Violent Ends before going into this, because I feel like a lot of the world building is very dependent on the events in that duology. So I myself was a bit lost starting this, because it just has been a while since I finished Our Violent Ends. So it's been a while since, you know, I had to refamiliarize myself with everything, and I don't think the book does a great job at kind of recapping you on important info of that duology. So in case you haven't read that, don't go into this. I think it'd be way too confusing world building wise, because story wise is its own thing. It does follow characters that we have met before, but it is mainly its own thing. And things that are relevant to like the plot do get recapped. It just things that are like very important to understanding how the world works are not, which I think was a strange choice, which is why this isn't a full 5-star for me. But the story itself was really good. I really love Rosalind. I think she's like, we follow a couple of characters, but I feel like Rosalind was like the main character that we spent the most time with, and I thought she was very interesting, and she went through a lot in that original duology, and therefore seeing kind of her being a main character and seeing her navigate the world was very interesting because of what she's been through before. I also thought the story was just very intriguing. I liked the more spy vibes to this, assassin vibes to this. I thought it was just a lot of fun, and I really liked that element to it. And there was also just like themes around like loyalty and like being on different sides of things, but also being family and not wanting to betray your cause, but also not wanting to betray your sibling, stuff like that. I thought was very interesting. And and especially like when we get towards the ending of this book, I feel like a lot of reveals happened that I didn't see coming, and I was shocked. And I'm very, very excited to continue on with this because I generally had such a good time reading this. Then next I read the Rom-Commers by Katherine Center, which I gave 1 out of 5 stars to, and is another guy I got from NetGalley. I don't even want to talk about this. Like, I get angry every single time I think about this book. That's just an energy I don't want in my life. This was bad. I am so sorry for all the people who have loved this book, because again, this is a very hyped one that I just didn't get around to before now, and I wish I did it because I genuinely hated every single aspect of this book, but especially my main character. I thought like she's truly one of the worst people I've ever read about, and she wasn't supposed to be. Like, we supposed to like her, and she was awful. And like, guy was also an asshole. There was no chemistry between our leads at all, and I just wanted to punch a wall after finishing this book, and I'm not an aggressive person. It was just that bad. Then next, I finally read The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I'm really bad at tossing myself the books. I give this 5 out of 5 stars. If you don't know, I have never read The Hunger Games before, and that is the first time, which was weird because when this was at its peak, I was also in my peak YA era. Like, I read everything that was popular at this time. Just never thought to be interested in The Hunger Games. I don't know what it was about it, but something about it just never really spoke to me. I never read it. But I do have to say, growing older, I have seen a lot of like talks about the series, spoiler free, and just the way people talk about like the different themes in this, I have been a bit curious about it and how I would feel about it. And now with the hype because of Sunrise of the Reaping, everybody's been rereading this. It finally caught me, and I read it. And this is what derailed my whole March TBR, by the way, as well. And I fucking loved it. I don't know what to tell you. I love this. I shouldn't have put off reading this all the time. Although I don't know if I would have loved this the same as I do now if I was a teen. I do think I definitely would have still enjoyed reading it, and I definitely wouldn't have lost out on anything reading it back then. But I definitely feel like a lot of like the subtleties within this book that are some of my favorite parts of it wouldn't have been things I picked up on back then. So there's that. Also, I just blew my nose, so that's why it's like really red. I apologize. But I thought this was so good. I think Katniss is an incredibly interesting main character. I really love following her. She's like perfectly flawed, if that makes sense. Like, she is flawed in so many ways that make her kind of like the perfect protagonist for this book. And she's such an interesting person to follow, so very likable. I really just think the games is very interesting. The whole concept of the Hunger Games. I feel like once we are thrown into the Hunger Games as well, this book just, Suzanne Collins is great at building the tension within the games, and you never at any point, at least I thought, knew for sure that Katniss was just like safe, even though, you know, I'm not gonna say more. And you generally felt the stakes of this event, and I really like that. I also thought just kind of like the little glimpses into like larger corruptions of this world that Katniss has been blind to up until this point were really well integrated and made me very excited to keep reading the series, which is what I ended up doing. I read Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins next. I gave this one 4 stars. This I liked a little bit less, but honestly it's a shame because when this started I was already so ready for it. I feel like when it started, I feel like there's immediate sense of kind of like stakes upped or like darkness upped. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like there's just this extra sense, like the whole first book is still very happy, but there was just this extra sense of darkness, of gloom, of tragedy throughout this entire book, partially because of Katniss's trauma, but also the rebellion is starting to happen and crackdowns to prevent the rebellion uprising are starting to happen, and therefore like a lot of dark shit happens in this book. But I feel like this book killed its own momentum because in the last part of this book we go back into the games, and I feel like that generally just put the whole kind of like build we were going at a standstill, and it put us in a different situation. And I didn't think the games in this one were as well executed. I think they were very interesting, I do have to say that. I feel like in theory it should have worked because it's a much more interesting concept than the games in book one. But because of one decision that was made that I can't talk about because of spoilers, I feel like the whole kind of like stakes and tension that was so well built in the first book was just undercut. And I don't know, I didn't feel the last bit of it, which is sad, which is why I gave it a 4-star. But I do think the rest of this book is still like really phenomenal. I just feel like it kind of like built to something and then like plummeted down a little bit. And that's not to say that the games were necessarily bad in this, they're just of a lower quality than the rest, if that makes sense. You know, I'm starting to get a cold or allergies are hitting me. I apologize. I don't know what's going on with me. But next, I read Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins, which I again gave 5 stars. Back to business. This is easily my favorite book of the month. This was so good and also so devastating. Like, I sobbed while reading this book. Like, ugly cried at this book in a way that I have never with a book before. And I very easily cry while reading. I'm an easy crier. That's the thing I am. So it's not like I don't experience crying during books very often. I do it even with books I don't like. So the fact that I say I've never cried this hard at a book before, that says something. I feel like this entire book is just kind of very devastating, showing the horrors of war and what comes with it. And I just think it's so well done, and in a way that isn't very typical for a YA trilogy, because like I said, I read them all at this time so I can compare, but in a way that is just so well executed and honestly makes it stand out amongst all of those other stories, and makes it make sense why this has held up for so long. Like, this was just an incredible finale. Then next I read Accidentally Amy by Lynn, which I gave 2 out of 5 stars to. I just needed something lighthearted and fun after Mockingjay broke me, and this ended up exactly delivering that, but also not much more than that. I thought I read this very quickly. It was very fun, very lighthearted. I thought the banter between the characters was really fun. It is a bit quirky in a way that it leans a bit cringy, so maybe that's something you gotta watch out for. But I feel like once I got into this book, I just was along for the ride. I didn't really mind that much, but I just feel like there was no real depth anywhere within this book, within like the characters or within the relationship, and therefore I feel like this is going to be one that's not gonna stick with me for very long. Then next I read Dating and Dragons by Kristy Boyce, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars to. This is a YA contemporary book, again more lighthearted, fluffy read, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I like the other book in this series, which is Dungeons and Drama. Other books are not related at all. I don't know why they were series. There was like no crossover. It just YA contemporaries set around Dungeons and Dragons. But I thought this was really fun. I really like the focus on friendship in this one as well. I thought the friend group was just a whole lot of fun. The main character also has like a special relationship with her grandmother, and she was a delight. Like, her grandma, the MVP of this book, like so funny and truly an icon. But I do have to say, I would like the romance, I thought it was cute, but I feel like at times it just randomly really focused on like their sexual attraction to each other, which, you know, it did give me a little bit of the ick considering this is YA, but like technically there's nothing wrong with it. But it just felt like such a weird tonal shift within like the rest of this book being like very cute and a bit goofy, silly, fun time. Then next I read Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors, which I give 2 out of 5 stars from the get-go from that gallery. This is another more literary fiction book that I had heard great things about, so I decided to check out, but this one sadly enough didn't work for me. And it truly means sadly enough because I can truly understand why this has worked for so many people. I feel like it goes very in depth on these characters. You really get to know them, and they deal the struggles they deal with, which are mainly grief and addiction, do feel very realistic in the way they are written. And I do think ultimately the conclusion as well just has a sense of catharsis to it, so I totally understand why this would be such a great and especially emotional read for a lot of people. But I just never really cared, which sounds evil, but I just never really managed to get that connection with this book, with these characters, and therefore sometimes when it went on and on about these characters' backstories, I was like, why should I care? Because I don't. And then lastly for this month we have A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen, which gives you the 5 stars to Misogyny from NetGalley. This one I've heard very mixed things about over the years it's been out. And I can say I understand both camps. My main issue with this book, and the reason why I totally understand why people would dislike this one, is that there was no world building, like none. And I felt so confused at times, and it is based on Norse mythology, so maybe it is my own fault for like not knowing a whole lot about that and therefore just missing out on things that are very obvious. But I also feel like there just like was no world building like at all. But besides that, I did think this was a really fun story, and therefore I understand what people like, because if you're not like a big, not very focused on like the fantasy element of a fantasy, you can totally understand where you're like, okay, fantasy world is background, the rest is what we're focusing on. Then I totally understand why you would really like this, because I do think it's a really fun time. I like the banter between our main character and our love interest. I think the story is pretty interesting, like the concept is there, and you know, it was very readable. I flew through this while I was reading it, but I missed a bit of a connection to it. I missed full investment in it. It never really engaged me as a reader, which is an issue I did also have previously with another book I read by this author. So maybe this is just not the author for me, and that's fine. I won't be picking up anything else by this author anymore, but that's also why I let it on a 3-star for me, because I feel like for me, I had fun with it. I did have some issues with it, but overall it just felt a bit mid to me. And yeah, that is everything I read in the month of March. I feel like this wrap up was a bit of a mess. I apologize, but I hope you still enjoyed. Let me know in the comments what you thought of these books, if you read them, and some of the books you read in March, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye.
Here I am again, the same old situation. Why does the God thing have to be so complicated? Should've